Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Audionautic. My name is Curtis.
And I'm Sunwarper.
How's it going, man? What are you up to?
Not much. I had to take a little breather yesterday, so that was good. It's good to get a little perspective, like we were talking about on the Discord. Sometimes you got to take a step away when everything feels a little daunting, and you just need to regain perspective.
Yeah, it's cool. It's got to be done. It's very easy to kind of get caught up in making sure that you're always making something, always producing something, trying to keep up with your contemporaries, and that's just not healthy. It's just not healthy.
Yeah, and it's good to remember why you do it. You do it because you love making music, not because you want, this or that.
Yeah, completely. If it's not, I think Amanda said it. Star Madman. If you're not having fun with it, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. So what have you been up to?
What have I been doing? I've been more writing. Everything is pretty much there now. Most of the demos for the album are pretty much done. Been doing.
How many songs you got?
There is 10, I believe. I believe there's 10.
Okay.
One or two might get cut, just because I don't know. I like numbers in that way, but I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes.
You got to make a Fibonacci number.
Something like that. I don't know. Some of the time. I always make more. I always write and make more, and then cut a few later down the line.
Yeah. Well, you can always release those as extras or physical only or something.
Yeah, exactly. In the immediate, however, this week we sat down with AMC.
AMC hosts 2 radio shows, and he's a good fountain of knowledge for submitting to radio when it comes to releases and things of that nature.
Yeah, totally. It was a lovely chat, very insightful, very clear cutting. Should we cut to his feed?
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, this week we are sitting down with Alistair, also known as AMC from Bloop Radio.
Hello, chaps. Hello, everyone.
Hey, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Not at all. How are you doing today?
Yeah, busy in the midst of relocating from southeast London to the total west side of England down to Cornwall, 6 miles from Land's End, moving Tuesday. So it's all hands to the pump, busy.
It's going to be fantastic when it's done, though.
Yeah,
that's the plan.
Michael, as ever, do you have a bio there?
I do. AMC broadcasts New Seeds Radio on Bloop and The Takeover on Reform Radio every month. On the topic of your radio shows, how did you get started?
These are good questions. So I'll try and keep it precise, but I may go off tangent. So it kind of makes sense to kind of start from the beginning, which I suppose for this would be when I was a kid. I didn't get on radio as a kid, I should say, but for context, radio's always been kind of the constant, and it was the source of probably most of my musical discoveries until obviously I got older as a teen and had a group of friends and so on. But so kind of broadcasting radio is always something that's been quietly in the background. And then if I fast forward to probably about 10 years ago when I sort of first started DJing, I use that term very loosely. It mainly started with sort of amusing myself, then putting things a little bit onto SoundCloud and seeing how things were there, to then getting into and sort of experimenting with some sort of groups and collectives locally to play out live. At that time, that was kind of what I thought was what I was going to get the most buzz from. And that sort of, I persevered with that for a couple of years, but then really wasn't getting that buzz at all. It was quite the opposite. It was becoming a bit of a slog. And I think partly from where I was living, it wasn't really hitting the right spots with the right people. The crowd wasn't right. And quite frankly, if I wanted to do what I wanted to do, I think I should have done it maybe 10 years earlier, a bit younger, and done the whole, sort of trying to gig all around London. And, that would have probably fitted more what I wanted to do. But I wasn't really into that scene. So it was then, well, how can I sort of express myself through DJing, as it were? And it kind of fell back to radio. So it was like, okay, radio is probably the best platform. How can I get into that? And at the time, and as we know now, we're very fortunate that there are so many radio and streaming platforms out there. In fact, now you don't even need to be on radio. You can just stream, and you can kind of treat it as your own kind of show. But I was kind of quite focused. I wanted to be associated with some sort of radio, to say, as you just said on the bio, New Seeds is on such and such radio. So it was through again, through sort of some friends that I heard about some particular stations, and I've probably been on 3 or 4 different platforms now, 3 or 4 different stations, and finally I think now found the best fit, and that was again through, and we'll probably get onto it. It was through connections. It was through I knew, and it was through referrals, and obviously some perseverance. And that's how I got on, really. At that point, I had a kind of a catalogue of shows that I could say, this is what I've done, and this is the sound and the sounds I like to play. And I think this fits with your station, and that kind of worked. So long answer, but I think hopefully makes sense in a contextual point of view.
That's very concise. No, as far as answers go, that's incredibly concise. When you're giving someone's backstory, I mean, that's nicely done. Yeah. We asked to speak to you, sit down with you today, because this rotation of Audionautic, we're looking at the promoting and the promotional side of artists' work. And part of that is submitting to radio and submitting your music to radio. And one part of that is press kits. And I was wondering, when you are receiving your submissions, what do you look for in a press kit?
So I'll caveat that straight away, that I think from what I'm doing, and I think commercial radio, I think would probably be quite different. So by commercial radio, I'm talking about, if I'm sure there are people out there who want to get played on Radio 1 or 6 Music, or whatever it is, but obviously that's not what I'm doing. I'm broadcasting still on, I suppose, commercial radio, but it's small scale. We're not talking like national, and I think that's important to delineate between the two, because I think pluggers and plugging and that kind of route still exists, but does not exist in the world that I'm operating in. So I'm just talking from that kind of underground station point of view, I would say. Bloop's got a large user base, a large for its size, but it's not like in hundreds of thousands or something like that. So in terms of kits, that's quite a novelty in my world. It's not that I don't like them, it's just that it's not something I generally receive too many of. But when I do, for me, they've got to kind of hit the right mark, and I'm sure we'll get into that. So more often than not, it's music will come in 2 channels. It will either be obviously myself, self-sourced, or through referrals and what have you, which I'm sure we'll get into. But then it's through the connections and through the people that I know. So, if Michael doesn't mind me saying, the way that the two of us sort of knew each other was, I heard of it was your previous guys, I think, before Sunwarper had popped up on a Boards of Canada forum, and I thought, that sounds cool. I'll have a listen to that. It really enjoyed it. And then of course it was just at the point when you changed to Sunwarper, and again, all of that music was and still is fantastic. And I think I pinged you out of just like, this is great, and if you ever feel like doing something for New Seeds, then that'd be great. And it just sort of happened from there. And so from now, I'm very fortunate that Michael sort of sends me a short, nice email, which I suppose is your press kit, that kind of explains, this is my new track, this is what's coming, go and have a listen. And that's fantastic. That is, I would say, I would get fewer of those than I would with the self sort of finding stuff. But if I try to park that I didn't know you, the way that sort of kit is and put together, I think is great, because it clearly explains what it is, who you are, what the music is, what the influence was. Here's some great artwork from it, go and have a listen. And I think that's a really good template to use in my experience, because I have received some other ones and they just go straight in the bin because they're just, been put together by a bot. It feels like, yeah. So that personal touch, which you kind of have in there, makes a big difference.
So short, concise, but heartfelt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, some sort of. It doesn't have to be like soppy or empathetic, but there's some sort of emotional connection with either the person or with what you have. Is it the sort of track that could fit into New Seeds nicely, or into the takeover, or into something else I'm doing? Is it something you think I might like? Is it maybe something a little bit different, but I might still be interested in it? Yeah, well, that's cool. Tell me a little bit about it. Kind of tee it up, and then I can be the judge of whether whether I like it or not. So that kind of connection really helps.
That brings up an interesting point, because I'm curious, when it comes to song selection for your shows, I know you source some yourself and take submissions, but do you try to stick within preferred genres, or do you always try to add new sounds and things like that?
Yeah, well, if I think about how the show has developed, or the shows have developed, it's subtly changed. So New Seeds has been going now 5 years. This is the 6th year this year, and I think if I listen to the earlier shows, it was a bit of a mishmash, because I hadn't really landed on the sound that I liked. I was actually playing a lot of records that other people were playing, and I think that's my number one kind of advice, not just for DJing, but kind of artists as well, is just stick to your sound. Really, if your music ends up sounding like somebody else, that doesn't matter, as long as it's something that you've done and you're not doing something to try and to just sound like somebody else, or fit into something else, or to fit into a genre. If you happen to, that's fine, but it's got to be something that's honest to you, right? And if I listen back to those shows, I'm just playing, to be frank, a lot of Balearic landfill would be the phrase that my Balearic chums would say. Now I think I kind of just started to ditch that and swerve it into actually stuff that I just love and like, and that's my selection criteria. Is if I love it, I'll play it. Simple as that. And it just so happens at the moment, for the last couple of years, and maybe for the foreseeable future, really meaningful, melodic electronica. And electronica is a shitty title, but that's the only one I can think of that kind of captures your synth wave, your vaporwave, your down tempo, your chill out, your ambient, that whole kind of spectrum. That's the core of the show. But there are different genres in there. And if I look at last month's show, we had a section of shoegaze music in there, and you go, what the hell's shoegaze got to do with electronica? And I kind of explain, well, it does. It has an awful lot. A lot of the most electronic composition comes from some sort of organic band material, whether you're solo or in a band. A lot of the electronic artists come from bands, or or solo artists. So there's a natural kind of synergy there, and then you actually then listen to shoegaze itself, that kind of early 90s all the way to sort of mid 90s, and that kind of revival that we've had the last couple of years. You take those guitars out, replace them with keys, you've got straight out down tempo electronica. It's beautiful. It just so happens it's with guitars and singing. So yeah, I do try and put in other genres when I think it works, or if I'm in the mood for it, and if I love it, it will go in there. But I don't try to be completely juxtaposed, but try and complement the two.
When you are receiving submissions, to what extent is the artwork a factor in your musical selections?
I think to answer that question, my instinct says not at all, but actually that's total nonsense. It really does, but it depends on the situation. So in a press kit, I don't think it's not the number one driver. Clearly the music is the number one driver, right? Because that's what's going to play. I can't play an image. However, if you've paid, and there's a kind of exception to this, but for the most part, I said, is if you are really passionate about what you've created and you're passionate about sharing that on a radio show or a streaming platform or whatever, then to me, logically, you would take care also in how it's presented and how it looks. And it should have some sort of association between the two. There is an exception, but I think, and I'll talk that in a sec, but generally, I think it is important because it shows to me just how much the artist cares about what they've produced and what they've created. And if they're really passionate about it, it will come through. And then there's a lens for me, and maybe it's for other people as well. I don't know if it's for you guys, but for me, music has always been something physical. I do not like digital music. I have to accept it. It's part of the world, and it certainly has its conveniences. But for me, it's a physical product. And as a physical product, it has to have an image. It has to have a feel, an aesthetic. I grew up with that. I love that still. It's why I've got billions of boxes behind me and loads more that I'm are taking on the move, because I love the feel. There is something really spectacular about that. I can't think of any other way to describe it. Just sitting down, which I can't do too much these days, but sit down with an LP, even a CD, and just flick through, the booklet, the imagery, the words, the lyrics, it provokes lots of memories as well, but even new stuff as well is really great to just the look and feel of it. The exception is when your aesthetic demands that you have very minimal or no artwork, and there is some of that, of course, around. You'll get a lot of that with the vaporwave scene. You've got that kind of split of the very traditional kind of fluorescent pinks and blues, and the kind of VHS-y look, the mucky kind of broken, distorted look, but you also get that very minimalist, nothing, and that's fine as long as because it complements what you've done. But what I wouldn't want to see, again, crazy. I know you never do it, Michael, but if you sent me one of your lush sounding, kind of, I'm thinking of nature and the birds singing and the seas crashing, but there's a standard JPEG of a cat smiling. I'll be like, well, what happened? This doesn't quite work for me, and I would kind of think there's something not quite right here, and I think it would influence for me. Kind of, is this person for real? I'm not sure kind of what they're up to here. So yeah, so I think to answer your question, it is important. I think it should reflect who you are, who the artist is, the care and the love that they've put into the music, and it obviously sort of complement actually the style and the type of music that's been put in there, unless of course the aesthetic kind of demands.
Yeah, it's interesting you point that out, because Curtis and I just talked about the importance of theme and narrative in the artwork. And this just emphasizes the point that it really does make a difference, and it helps convey a certain mood and aesthetic, like you were saying, with you don't want to hear beach sounds and stuff and then see just some cat. So in the spirit of that, what sort of red flags should musicians and producers avoid when submitting to stations and DJs?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. Number one is just cut the bullshit. So don't for me personally, don't hype it up. I will be the judge of how good it is because you're sending it to me, and you're going to send it to somebody else, and they'll have their own opinion, their own view. Clearly, as an artist, you've got your own. Of course, you have. But I think I was reading somewhere, as soon as you kind of hit that button to send it out, although you might have your name as I don't know if this is controversial, although you might have a name as a writing credit, it's not your music anymore. It's now the public's music. It's got out there. So you might own it, but it's not yours anymore. So it's the beauty of it. I can be the judge of whether I like it or not. So don't bullshit. Don't hype it up. Just tell me what it is. Tell me what it means to you. Maybe give me some feel as to who you are and to why you think I might like it. So that kind of interpersonal connection. So, I'm telling you all the things to do. So don't do the opposite of those things. Don't just give me a load of bullshit. Don't hype it up. And don't be too don't be too elongated with it either. Cut to it. Hopefully, I'm keeping things to it as well. So, because certainly, if you're working on a more high-profile stations, you're going to get a lot of submissions, and so people won't have the time to read all this stuff. And as soon as they send the bullshit, that's just going to end up in the spam or the the deleted folder. Those are things that leap to mind.
You are just about to move. For everyone at home, there is a ton of boxes behind Alistair, and obviously moving is a big, arduous process. What happens next after that? After what's coming up for New Seeds and the takeover?
Well, New Season takeover, that I think is in my little world going from incremental steps forward. So there's a podcast interview, I think from maybe 18 months ago, from Audionautic, and he was talking about, someone asked, the interviewer asked him, so what was the tipping point for you from kind of being that real underground anticon sound into it kind of exploding and everything we kind of know about him? And he said, it was just incremental. He said, I can't put it down to one thing. It's just everything that you put out there, whether it's success or not, is a tiny little percentage. And then at some point, he said, I don't know when it happened, but it suddenly just balanced and everything kind of just went boom. Now, I don't know if there's going to be a point of that with what I'm doing with New Seeds or Reform, but it does feel, and with Gated, because there's the podcast I do with Gated recordings, and all these little things have all sort of incidentally helped elevate those platforms. So I hope that the more these little things I keep doing, then hopefully there'll be new and exciting avenues to go. So the answer to that, but the actual thing I really want to get into is what you two do, is actually make music. And I have started to do that, and it's been extremely painful and troublesome, and I don't want it to turn this into a counselling or therapy session, so I'll stop there. But I'm hoping actually that the environment. Well, I'm not hoping. I'm intending that the change of scenery, change of pace, the kind of change of focus will kind of get me over the hurdle and my ego to say, stop messing about. Actually, just let it go and see where it goes. So maybe make some music. There we go.
I really like that perspective, and I think it's something that we all need to keep in mind. It's not always about going viral or something like that, or overnight success. It's about staying the course, just pushing through, and remembering that every small victory is still a victory.
Yeah, I'll dig out the link in case anyone listening is interested, because it's a really great interview.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Alistair. It's been absolutely fantastic to sit and have a chat with you.
Oh, thanks, guys. Been nice to meet you at last.
What wonderful webs of wisdom were woven during that interview. Alistair is such a nice guy.
Yeah, he's just incredibly insightful. He has a lot to share, and I was really glad he could come on and give some guidance on how to approach talking to DJs and radio stations and the things to consider and that you shouldn't do when writing press kits and emails.
Yeah, completely. I was particularly enamored by his appreciation of sticking to one's sound. This idea of if you've got a set of frequencies, a set of sonics that particularly speaks to you and resonates with you, be confident in that and take that forward, because that is your sound and that is what's going to propel you forward.
Yeah, it's a bit of an opposing idea from what you usually hear from, playlisters and marketers and YouTube gurus and all that stuff, because they all say, you want to try to fit in to find your sound in these genres so that you can get on playlists and get on radio and stuff. But I mean, I think what AMC makes a lot more sense when it comes to wanting to express yourself. And he even says, hey, if you want to be in the background of YouTube videos, that's fine. And there's no problem trying to make sounds like to fit in lo-fi playlists or this and that. But if you want to express your artistic ideas, you have to do it as you, not trying to sound like someone else.
You have to be, I think Gibson would say, you have to play authentic, as they might say. Thank you ever so much for joining us this week. We will be back in a fortnight. In the meantime, we have a new radio broadcast next week. For now, we all love you and leave you. Thanks again. See you next time.